Afternoon, everyone, or morning. My name's Vicky Hope Walker, and I'm the CEO of the National Paralympic Heritage Trust, as you can see behind me. I've been invited to talk to you about accessibility and websites, and I guess for good reason, because given the nature of our work, Paralympic Heritage, if we don't get this right, we're failing a major part of our audiences immediately. And I have to say that at the start of my work with the Trust, this was one of the things I was really worried about, access generally, and making sure I got it right. And I guess before I begin, perhaps the one thing to say to you all is, actually, we don't get it right. It's impossible to get it right, because everyone's so different. Every person, every human being is an individual. Every disabled person is a human being and an individual, and their disability is individual to them. So the key thing is to keep trying, to keep looking at how you can improve your website and its accessibility. And the importance of that is that 1/5 of our population approximately suffers from a disability, and many of those are visual impairment and hearing loss. So you're missing out on a huge audience, actually, if you don't do this. Equally, if you're putting on events at your museum that are for people with disabilities, but your website gives them no means of preparing for their visit, because they can't access it, then you're actually preventing them from coming to your events. So it's not just about accessibility to your website. If it's accessible, it will also help you in terms of your events at your museum. So I've been given a series of questions to reflect on and share with you. So I've talked a little bit about the benefits of web accessibility to all users. And I think some of the things to kind of draw on specifically in relation to that is, firstly, the laws that were introduced by the government and website accessibility last year were really, really good. And as a result of that, so many more sites have been improved. So if you're stuck and you're thinking, well, what do I need to do? And do I need to make a comparison? The first thing I recommend, and it is law actually part of this, is to look at that and make sure that you're meeting some of those fundamentals. And in terms of accessibility, we're talking about all sorts of disability, from autism to visual impairment to hearing loss, and learning needs as well. So what you need to think of is, where would sign language be useful within my website? Where would audio description be useful in my website? What can I do to improve that? And a lot of people get put off because they're worried about the cost, and they think, well, it'll cost a fortune to actually bring somebody to do the sign language and the audio description. But actually, the best thing you can do is build links with your local communities. We use, for example, Bucks Vision, who do a lot of our audio description for us. We also have found 2 local British Sign Language experts who come in and do things for a much, much more reasonable cost. And they're also kind of readily available, and you don't have to book these things weeks in advance. So I guess that's sort of one of my top tips. I think the other one is to provide on your website information on accessibility when people do actually visit. So that's not so much about making your website accessible, but it's providing access information for a physical visit, which is really important. And again, there's no point in doing that in a straightforward format. You need to think about who those visitors might be and what they might require. So, for example, somebody with visual impairment will need that done in an audio way, and somebody with autism will need to be warned of things like sounds that could be disturbing for them, or they might need pictures in order to kind of visualize where they're going, which is very good at building their confidence. If you wanted to be super duper at this, introducing things like widget, information in widget format, or Makaton, which is like a visual language for people with learning needs, which makes it much easier for them to understand and be in control of understanding their own visit rather than being dependent on a carer or somebody else. But going back to the website itself, you know, some of the really basic things have to be looking at your typeset, giving the ability for people to increase the typeset, to think very, very carefully about the colors that you use on your website and what will help with visual impairment, and to think very carefully about making your website really fancy. Sometimes you might have a bar at the top with changing images, and that can be very difficult for people to focus on and get information from if it's something that moves across quite quickly that they can't focus in on and expand using some of the tools of their own phone or their own laptop to improve the accessibility even more and in a way that is tailored to their needs. So I think that's a kind of a bit of a taster. In terms of websites that I think are difficult for access, to be quite honest with you, if you're talking about certain disabilities like profound deafness or visual impairment or autism particularly, and learning needs, many websites really don't come up to the mark and aren't helpful. And I think another way of really testing what you are doing is, again, to draw on local disability groups to actually do a little audit of your website. You can pay an external consultant to come and do this, and that can be quite expensive, but equally valuable and a great way of building your relationship with those local disability organisations is to invite them to do an audit and give you some recommendations of improvement. And in doing so, you then might find people, as we did, like Bucks Vision, to help you add in some audio description as well. So really, you know, again, I guess a top tip is to relate to and work with your local disability groups to help you improve your website access. Another issue is, and it relates to the same thing, is finding a designer that's really brilliant at access, website access, a web designer. In my experience, you won't get that. You'll get them, they will be following the regulations, they will be following legal requirements, but they won't have the expertise in other areas. I think it's very unusual to come across that, but you might do. If you don't, again, it comes back to working with those local disability groups, involving them in any website development that you might be working on, and getting their input, and maybe forming a little steering group to help you improve that. And I have to say that it's in terms of being cost effective, in terms of speaking to your audiences and opening up new audiences, that is by far, in my experience, the best way of working. And also, finally, just keeping open to comments and suggestions, and realizing this is a journey that doesn't end. It's one that you need to keep thinking about, keep tweaking, keep improving, and keep asking those audiences to help you. Thank you very much. I hope you found that useful.